I get the pleasure of introducing Ike Ahmed. I'm a little nervous. His top 5 are going to be the top 5 reasons not to have taken me as a fellow. But, you know, great mentor, good friend, and really appreciate having you here.
No, thanks, Arsham, and thanks so much for having me up here. I really enjoyed. I'm glad I'm kind of speaking after most of the speakers in this session here. If I heard Paul talk, I probably would have gone into retina back as a resident. And it is a reflection, actually, speaking about what I would do differently or think differently, in my younger self. But I think most of all, I can tell you right now, I feel lucky because I don't feel old at all. I don't think, Paul, you're not an old guy, man. You're younger than a lot of people in this room as far as how you think. And I think probably the thing I feel most happy about in my life so far is that I still feel young. I still feel energetic. I still feel passionate about what I do. And I think, I hope that you all will feel that after 10 years, after 15 years, after 20 years, because I think that's really the engine that I think lets us continue our discovery and our journey. And I think that's probably what hopefully some of us are sharing here. And I'd like you all to think about what would you tell your younger self in 15, 20 years. So this has a picture of me and my younger self. This is during my fellowship. In my glaucoma fellowship, which by the way, at the time and even now, the exciting, sexy thing wasn't to do a glaucoma fellowship. You know, even now we have a number of unmatched programs, and back then it was even more. You know, everyone was going into cataract refractive, which I love as well. Retina was kind of emerging, corneas emerging, and glaucoma was kind of in the doldrums. I made a decision, and this is kind of reflection of my life being different from everybody else, where I grew up, where I lived, where I was brought up and raised, to carve a different path. I saw everyone running to one area. I went to completely the other area because I thought there's an opportunity maybe to do something different. But this is me. I suffered an orbital fracture in a fight on a basketball court in Salt Lake City as a brown guy in Salt Lake City in my fellowship. And literally 2 weeks later, I broke my right wrist. And so I had my right wrist fracture, and I had diplopia for about 6 weeks after in the middle of my fellowship. But it was one of the best experiences I had, because what happened at that time was I had to use my left hand. Alan Crandall, my preceptor, said, "Ike, don't stop operating, just use your left hand." And so I learned to use my left hand, and to this day I still use my left hand for so much of my work, and a lot of what I do has helped me out. So that's kind of where I started off. But I think, I love this quote from Alan Kay, one of the great American computer programmers in personal computing. The best way to predict the future, we all want to know what the future's like. If we knew what's going to happen tomorrow, imagine the power we have in terms of changing what we do today. And I think probably the best way to really predict that is to get involved and to invent it. And so, back at that time, I think, I thought glaucoma was an area that needed some innovation, needed some change. And no better way to get involved and to change the way our field is going to flow than to get in there and to make that change yourself, being in the middle of all the action. And so, yes, I think we got to follow. Many of you are here listening to us speak up here. And I hope you don't follow us, honestly. I hope you say, okay, Ike said something, whatever. I'm going to actually think something differently and do it a different way. But please don't do it in an egotistical way, in a selfish way. Do it for a genuine way because you want to make that difference, but think differently. I think that's important. So I also, grew up in an era where we had an explosion of glaucoma drops, prostaglandins, topical alpha agonists, CAIs, and it was really an exciting time. Lots of money in the field of pharma. But, talking to my younger self, I'd realize that these drops are really a Band-Aid solution. Compliance, adherence, quality of life, adverse events, and not dealing with the pathology actually perpetuates the problem to lead to bigger issues when we have to deal with them surgically. And so we're moving away from this, and I think the efforts made in our field to find other solutions are important and upon us here today. And part of that is this movement toward interventional glaucoma. And literally a few people in our field have changed the way we think about glaucoma. We talk about MIGS, drug delivery, SLT first line, and the rest of it. These were not something and ideas that were back then. So literally changing a society, changing a group to think interventionally, to think from a more passive way of treatment to an active way of treatment, is something that's really a paradigm shift that we don't often see in every specialty. If you think about it, in the last 20 years, cataract, refractive, retina, a lot of areas have been fairly, consistent in terms of the approaches, although they've been, of course, innovation and improvement. but glaucoma is literally turning on its head. And that's something that I think we've seen and continue to see. But it also has made us get back to understand the basic science of what we do in the eye and the resultant outcomes. And the need to have a better understanding of outflow, of how the eye heals, is something we still lack. And that's an area that we've gone back to the lab now. And in my career, I've gone back to the lab now in the last couple of years, doing work now at the basic science level to help understand what we're finding in the clinical lab in our ORs. But I found in my career the biggest challenge to affect change isn't the technology, it's the people. It's the people who are against progress. It's the people who are against new ideas. It's the people who are against people who look different than you, who think different than you, who maybe have a different way of life than you. And I think 2023 has come a long way, but I did not realize that how hard that would be in my early in my career, where people will purposely exclude you, and still do, and minimize you, and really push you away. And that's difficult to deal with when you go in wide-eyed and eager and well-intentioned. I think that was hard to deal with. I know a lot of innovators in this room, people who have spoken before me, can probably attest to the challenges they've had to face. So it's all glamour and glitz out here, I guess, but really the stuff we had to feel personal, and the personal insults were difficult. However, it's not just that. It's also how do we affect cultural change? How do you make people change the way we think about treating glaucoma, for example? How do you move glaucoma from the ivory towers of the glaucoma specialist into the democratizing way of treating glaucoma in our comprehensive practices? And how do we make people think of not being passive and just getting that habits of just getting patients back and watching them get worse, and taking that courageous step at being interventional and doing something differently? How do we do that? I find that to be difficult and challenging. And still to this day, I still see resistance, tremendous resistance from apathy, indifference, and just wanting to keep things the way they are and being comfortable. And that's the biggest challenge. I didn't also realize back then that how important reimbursement would be in how medicine is practiced. Being Canadian and also now working in the US, I've had interesting reflection on that as well. But reimbursement, whether it's an issue with regards to authorization, the procedures, whether it's a driver for choosing a procedure, and access, has become almost a bigger factor than science. I think that's a little bit of a sad description of where we're at when these become important drivers in terms of why we went into medicine. But we have to recognize that and build the right paradigm to show our payers and our elected officials about what's important. And that's why quality of life, quality of life years, cost effectiveness, IC ratios are becoming more important than just simply measuring IOP and visual fields and glaucoma drops. That's the language that we need to speak to help society understand the value that we bring to them as physicians. Because traditional metrics are old school and they don't fly anymore, so change the language that we speak, understand the terminology, and get out of the typical traditional way of measuring things. Of course, it's exciting. I would tell myself today that although surgery is cool and fun and interesting, my goal in life is to get to the day where we don't treat glaucoma with surgery. And the exciting work in gene therapy and neuroprotection has been elusive and difficult, but man, these are achievable prizes in our lifetime. And watch and see what happens in this area and the exciting innovation in this space. And of course, artificial intelligence, big data, this is going to continue to change the way we manage glaucoma. I think, I did not realize how explosive this would be in terms of the impact it would have on our practices and how we manage and how we work on our team. I think those are all important things that I think I would tell myself back then to get involved early on. So although glaucoma maybe isn't considered to be sexy, it wasn't at the time. Never did I think that, my hair would have an impact on my career or how we handle ourselves. But, our personalities do make a difference in how we change our field. And although technology, research, statistics are important to move the field, the biggest thing I tell myself and all the investment I did in my education was that wasn't as important as the human spirit and the soul that each of us bring and the powers that God has given to us to affect the change to help our fellow human being. And don't forget how important that is in the end of the day with all the numbers and all the crunching we do. Remember why we're here on this earth and what we're here to do. And that will drive you as a human spirit to make that change and be the compass and the moral compass to do the right ethical thing Because these days it's hard to know what's right and wrong. But be true to yourself and do things for the good reason, not to just show off and be an egotistical person. And I think you'll be happy in the end of the day. Thank you very much.